All right, we'll just give everyone a few minutes to log on. Welcome to the Kensington Bridge Environmental Assessment, our first public information center for this project. I do want to let everyone know that we will be recording this session and then it will be made available online on getinvolved.london.ca so that you can watch it or share it afterwards. And just a reminder that all of our attendees' cameras and microphones are off for the duration of the webinar. All right, give one more minute and then I'm going to begin with our land acknowledgement. All right, we will get started. So we acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Unapawa, and Attawandaron peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. We acknowledge all the treaties that are specific to this area. The two Roe-Wapum Belt Treaty of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy / Silver Covenant Chain, the Beaver Hunting Grounds of the Haudenosaunee Nanfan Treaty of 1701, the McKee Treaty of 1790, the London Township Treaty of 1796, the Huron Tract Treaty of 1827, with the Anishinaabe, and the Dish with the One Spoon Covenant Wapum of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. The three Indigenous nations that are neighbors to London are the Chippewa of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation, who all continue to live as sovereign nations with individual and unique languages, cultures, and customs. All right, so I'll say welcome again to the Kensington Bridge Public Information Center, and we can go ahead with the next slide. So just a couple of notes on how today's session will go. Please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen throughout the session to ask questions. We will have several members of the project team here to answer them. We will do all of those at the end of the presentation. If there's anything you'd like to clarify once your question has been answered, just feel free to pop it back in the chat and we can continue to help make sure your question gets answered. As I already mentioned, this meeting will be recorded and posted online after. We have disabled the chat function just to keep everything streamlined and in the Q&A button. So please use that one if you want to communicate with us, ask a question or a comment throughout. So with that, I'll give it over to my colleague, Carl.
Thanks, Megan. We have a full team here from the city and our consultant to help answer any questions and make the presentation of where we're at now with PIC number 1. We started there with Megan Fontaine. She's our moderator for tonight, and she'll be with us throughout. I'm Carl Grabowski. I'm the program manager in the Transportation Planning and Design Division. The next person, Jane Fullick, she's the project manager, again, from the Transportation Planning and Design Division. With our consultant, the next 3 people on this slide that's noted is John Pucchio. He's the project manager. John Grunice, he's on the planning lead. And Paul Adams, the planner, and working fairly heavily on this project overall. A couple other people that are here is Kyle Ganyu, he's our heritage planner. And Stephanie Wilson's here from our Parks Planning Department. So from there, our presenters are here throughout the presentation. As each individual makes a presentation, others will be turning off their cameras, but we're still here to assist as needed. So from there, I'll hand it back to Akon.
Thanks, Carl. So quick agenda for the meeting is we're just going to we've already done the introductions. We'll go over the purpose of the meeting. We're hoping the presentation will last approximately 30 minutes. And then we'll finish off with a question and answer period. And once the questions dry up, we'll end the presentation there. So the purpose of our Public Information Center is to first introduce the project. We'll give you an idea of the municipal class environmental assessment process. We'll give you a summary of some of the work we've completed to date, present our problem and opportunity statement for the bridge, describe the existing conditions for the bridge in the area, and then also present our alternative planning solutions, the evaluation summary of those solutions, and what our preliminary recommended planning solution would be. And the last part is to meet the project team and then solicit feedback from the public. So this is a graphic that just shows the process for the municipal class environmental assessment. It's a 5-phase process. This project is classed as a Schedule C project, so it follows all 5 phases of the process. The first phase is the problem and opportunity. This is where we look at the bridge or whatever the problem is and figure out what the problem and opportunity is for this project. After this, we send out the notice of study commencement, and we did that in late March of this year. We then move into phase 2, and that's where we look at the alternative solutions to the problem. How can we address the problem and opportunity? We come up with some solutions, evaluate those solutions, and then we get to where we are now, which is Public Information Center number 1, and we present our preliminary recommendation for the bridge. If this was a Schedule B project, we would stop the process here, but because it's a Schedule C, we move on to phase 3. And in phase 3, we come up with design concepts for the recommended alternative solution, and just the best way to try to find the best way to address that solution. From there, we would move on to evaluating those design concepts and then present our preliminary preferred design concept at Public Information Center number 2, which we are tentatively scheduled for November of 2022. After that, we move into phase 4, which would then be where we would write the report, which is the environmental study report, which would describe the process we went through to come up with our final answers, our consultation process, and then we would publish this report for public review for 30 days and address any comments that would come out of that review period. And finally, after phase 4, it's implementation. So the city can then move on to detailed design and construction once all questions, comments, or concerns are addressed. And John will move on to the project summary and study area.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Pucchio again, project manager and structural engineer. So the study area we're looking at here is centered around Kensington Bridge. So that's located on Riverside Drive and Dundas Street. And the area does include basically Riverside from Warncliffe Road North to Rideout Street North, which is sort of the east extent of Dundas Street for this project itself. Again, the primary focus of this project is the vicinity of Kensington Bridge, and essentially AECOM is London's consultant for the project. We have a little bit of history with the bridge, having completed a preliminary structural design report in the past. That report, just for some background information, did recommend deck replacement. It recommended steel coating as well as other significant repairs to the bridge in general. So Kensington Bridge was constructed in 1930 and is a 3-span structure supported on a concrete substructure. Currently, the bridge is 92 years old. Each span of the bridge is supported by an independent 32-meter-long riveted steel pony truss system known as a modified Warren truss configuration. Lots of different strange words. The term pony truss, interestingly, is given to trusses located on both sides of the road that are not connected at the top over the roadway, just for background. Trusses on each side of the roadway are spaced approximately 10.6 meters apart, leaving enough space for 2 eastbound vehicle travel lanes, plus a bidirectional cycle track on the south side of the bridge. And there are also cantilevered sidewalks on both sides, on the outside of the trusses for pedestrians, and they measure about 2.7 meters in width. Top of the roadway is an exposed concrete deck slab, which hides a grid of supporting structural steel framing below. As mentioned, the substructure consists of concrete abutments and piers placed on spread footings below the ground level. The west abutment is also integrated with the West London Dike system located along the west side of the river. The bridge spans the north branch of the Thames River, as well as the Thames Valley Parkway, or TVP, which passes below the east and west bounds, just adjacent to the bridge abutments. The bridge carries about 9,500 vehicles a day heading into the downtown. As well, there's approximately 1,200 users on the TVP each day, which more than doubles during the summer months. So there is a lot of activity on, around, and below the bridge in general. And as a final note, the bridge has undergone major rehabilitations, namely in 1960, 1985, and 1996. And in recent years, we have found that there's been an increased amount of maintenance and repair work on the bridge. The list of that work includes concrete abutment repairs, expansion joint replacement and repairs to the surface concrete on the deck and sidewalk and curbs. So moving into other considerations for the site, historically, a crossing at the Thames River at this location has been an important link in connecting West London to the City of London. Interestingly, this bridge is the third road bridge at this location over the years. From a cultural heritage perspective, a 2018 report identified this bridge as having significant cultural value and interest. Noting that the Kensington Bridge is also designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and is part of the Blackfriars Petersville Heritage Conservation District. A couple of other notable points of interest from the cultural heritage perspective. The bridge was designed by John Rostron, who is a municipal engineer with the City of London back in the day. The bridge was also built by the Hamilton Bridge Company, which is a well-known bridge manufacturing company in the early 20th century. Both Rostron and the Hamilton Bridge Company are well known locally, having designed and constructed various bridges around London. Finally, from a cultural heritage perspective, there is significant cultural value in the bridge that has been identified. Further heritage reporting requirements would be required depending on the proposed work of the bridge, and this would be included in the heritage impact assessment. Just a quick acknowledgement of two other studies that have been initiated as part of the environmental assessment. First is the Stage 1 archaeological assessment, which is underway to determine the potential for archaeological resources in the area. The second is an environmental study, impact study, which is being completed to evaluate the potential for aquatic and terrestrial species at risk, which may occur in the vicinity of the study area. This will be completed and drawn from numerous area studies that have been recently completed and will be consolidated into the information attached as part of the environmental impact study. Any gaps in data will be identified as part of that study for additional studies in the future. As part of the municipal class environmental assessment process, a key starting point to any project is the problem and opportunity statement. This is often referred to as the central theme and really sets the objective and scope of the project. For this project, the following problem statement was identified: to address ongoing maintenance issues with the bridge and to achieve additional service life of 50 years, Deck replacement, steel recoating, and other major repairs are required. The Thames Valley Parkway passes below the east and west spans of the bridge, as mentioned previously, with height clearances of 2.5 to 4 meters, depending on which side you're on. And the bridge meets the criteria to merit heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act, as also mentioned, and is part of that Blackfriars Petersville Heritage Conservation District. So the opportunity here is to identify the preferred solution for a new or rehabilitated Kensington Bridge through supporting background studies, field investigations, and a systematic qualitative evaluation process. We're also to gather feedback from the public, area stakeholders, agencies, and Indigenous communities, allowing for the sharing of ideas. And finally, we're going to coordinate any bridge work with planned improvements on the TVP. After defining the problem and opportunity statements, the next step in the municipal class EA process is to determine feasible and alternate solutions to solve the problem and realize the opportunities. For the project, 3 planning solutions were identified. There's always the do nothing approach, which is often part of many EAs, and this alternative provides a basis on which other alternative planning solutions can be compared. This alternative does not really address the problem and opportunity statement and generally is ruled out as a viable options moving forward. Second alternate planning solution we're looking at is rehabilitation of the existing structure. This alternative would include completing rehabilitation works to achieve a minimum 50-year service life objective. Third alternative we're looking at, there's both A and B. Essentially, it's to replace the structure. The first 3A is essentially replace the structure in the existing alignment. In other words, put it where the existing bridge is right now. The part B could be a new bridge in an alignment, for example, south of the existing bridge. So essentially, we're looking at these 3 alternatives. Both alternatives 2 and 3 will address the problem statement and reflects the city's commitment to safe and integrated facilities for all users, including pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. So let's explore each of those alternatives a little bit further in the next number of slides. Alternative 2 represents a major and significant undertaking to rehabilitate the bridge and upgrade various structural elements of the bridge to the current bridge code. The full scope of rehabilitation work would need to address noted issues at the bridge over the remaining service life, which could include, but not limited to, the following. There's ongoing deterioration of the deck slab, as mentioned earlier. This results in periodic repairs, and this needs to be addressed potentially through deck replacement. There are leakage issues known at the expansion joints over the piers and abutments. That leads to further deterioration of the substructure itself, and those require replacement or repair of through some other means. The bridge approaches require review and potential realignment to accommodate a minor grade increase. Say, for example, if you replace the deck. We also need to address deteriorated and under capacity structural steel members with repairs to the truss and floor beams and other miscellaneous steel components. We need to address deteriorating structural steel in general through recoating. Need to address the condition of the bearings at abutments and piers, potentially through replacement. The lack of barrier protection system on the roadside as it relates to the trusses themselves requires to be reviewed. Continuing deterioration of other concrete components, such as the structure, also has to be reviewed. We need to review the general bridge drainage on the decks, incorporate and potentially incorporate deck drains if required when we look at the whole deck system. Thames Valley Parkway clearances below the bridge requires review, and improvements should be integrated where possible. So to reiterate, the objective of all this work would be to extend the service life of the bridge by approximately 50 years. The actual scope of work would be reviewed in later stages of the EA process if this alternative is carried forward. Other notable keys to rehabilitation would include coordination with other future area projects, such as replacement of the path retaining walls on the east side. One lane of traffic detouring on the Queens Bridge located to the north of the Kensington Bridge is what is a feasible alternative for detouring traffic. This is made necessary because of the nature of rehabilitation work of a trucks bridge, as well as safety requirements of the traveling public during major construction work on the bridge. And finally, there'll be a need to have some temporary TDP detours and closures through periods of the project as well. So next we have alternative 3A, which involves replacement of the existing bridge in the same location as the existing bridge. In other words, the existing bridge would be removed in its entirety and replaced with another type of bridge in its location. A bridge replacement may typically be slightly longer, slightly wider to accommodate various functional improvements for the site. I will say that the focus of this stage is not the type of bridge, but rather the concept of replacement. The actual types of bridge and focuses of the work will be reviewed at later stages of the EA process should this alternative be carried forward. Similar to alternative 2, though, the other notable keys to a replacement project would include the coordination of other future area projects, such as those path retaining walls that I had mentioned along the east side. Also, because of the nature of replacing a truss, you can't stage the traffic on the existing bridge. So one lane of traffic detouring on the Queens Bridge north of Kensington Bridge would be required during construction. And again, it's just not feasible to stage construction on a truss bridge. You can't remove half of it and have the other half basic support itself. And finally, there would be some temporary TDP detours and closures periodically during parts of the work. Finally, we have alternative 3B, which is a new bridge on a new alignment. So this is similar to alternative 3A, but involves replacement of the bridge just south of the existing bridge with new approach roadworks leading up to that. This permits construction of a new bridge offline, essentially. Traffic could remain on the existing bridge for a period of time, but later detoured onto Queens as required to facilitate parts of the work. Again, the focus at this stage is not the type of bridge, but rather the concept of replacement. The actual types of bridge and the scope of work would be reviewed later in the stages of the EA process if this alternative is carried forward. So we have 5 key factors that we use in evaluating the alternatives, namely socioeconomic, cultural environment, natural heritage, technical, and economic and financial. When we are reviewing socioeconomic factors, we are looking primarily at property impacts. For example, there may be potential impacts to private property, there may be impacts to local businesses, and just general impacts to existing public use spaces. When we review cultural environment factors, we're looking for impacts and disturbance to archaeological resources, as well as cultural heritage landscapes and built heritage resources. When we review natural heritage aspects, we are considering impacts and enhancements to aquatic environment, to terrestrial environment, and species at risk. We are also reviewing impacts to the project on source water, if any. When we review technical aspects, we consider issues related to general design, constructability, transportation, traffic, as well as safety, things like structural competency, complexity of the design, ease of construction, functionality improvements to all users of the bridge, potential impacts to municipal servicing, river navigation, to name a few things. When we are reviewing economic and financial, we are not only looking at initial capital costs, but also future costs such as maintenance and other operating costs. Where applicable, we are also looking at the potential land acquisition costs. Slide, Paul. So the following is a high-level summary of the impacts for each of the alternatives and recommendations for carrying forward the alternatives to the next phase of the EA. Again, from a do-nothing perspective, this does not address the problem opportunity statement and is screened out from additional study. With respect to rehabilitation, this does address the problem opportunity statement. For example, rehabilitation will not involve any in-water work, and therefore those impacts are minimized. Rehabilitation will impact some cultural heritage aspects of the bridge. However, those impacts can be mitigated, and generally the cultural heritage of the bridge is protected and maintained. The cost of rehabilitation in general has a lower initial cost than the other alternatives. And with an expected remaining service life of the bridge, it provides a pretty good return on the money spent for rehabilitation. So with respect to alternative 3A, or structural replacement on the existing alignment, this also addresses the problem opportunity statement. However, replacement will result in water work to construct piers and also to remove the old piers, with the potential to disrupt some of the aquatic habitat. Removing the bridge will also have a serious cultural heritage impact for obvious reason. We're taking out the old bridge and essentially doing away with it. From the new bridge construction, with new bridge construction also comes approach works to suit the new arrangement. This will require some road reconstruction at both ends of the bridge and impact some of the recent improvements completed on Dundas Street, for example. The cost of replacement is relatively high compared to rehabilitation, but it does come also with a longer service life of that newer structure. Finally, we have alternative 3B, or structural replacement on a new alignment, which also addresses the problem opportunity statement. Many of these impacts are similar to alternative 3A, but with the new alignment, most of the impacts are increased actually. Further, there are other significant impacts that are added to the issue, including disruption of existing park areas, disruption of the existing stormwater outfall on the east side. And also there is a high potential for archaeological disturbances in the area now that we're taking that a new alignment. So with these considerations briefly outlined, the recommendation is to carry forward rehabilitation into phase 3, design concepts, and explore alternatives associated with rehabilitation. But replacement alternatives 3A and 3B were not recommended to be carried forward. Let's go to the next slide, Paul. So essentially, again, to recap, and with these recommendations in mind, alternative design concepts for rehabilitation will be reviewed and presented in PIC2, which is scheduled for the fall of this year. So essentially, we're going to look at the problems with rehabilitation, do some extra homework, look at all the different options for rehabilitation, and come up with some alternatives and additional design concepts associated with rehabilitation.
Okay. For the next steps after this PIC, we're gonna receive as much input as we can from the public, agencies, stakeholders, and confirm our preferred planning alternative. And then, as John mentioned, we will use that preferred alternative to come up some design concepts for the Rehabilitate, the bridge, and we will evaluate those design concepts. And in November of 2022, we will hold PIC number 2 and present our preferred design concept for the recommended solution. And again, we'll hold the PIC and we'll receive and consider any input from the public, agencies and stakeholders, again, to confirm the preferred planning and design alternatives. From that point, we'll move on to writing the environmental study report. Once that study report is prepared, we will make it available for public review for 30 days, where we can receive more comments on the report, answer any questions. And then if there are no issues or concern raised within those 30-day period and subject to Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks acceptance, the city then can move on to the detailed design and then construction of the recommended project. For the last slide here is just how to get involved with this project. You can visit the website, which is the getinvolved.london.ca /Kensingtonbridge. You can leave comments there, ask questions, and also access a recording of this meeting. Also available are Carl Grabowski from the city and John Pucchio from AECOM, and their contact information is on the screen here as well. It's also on the project page, and you can contact them by email as well and ask any questions if you have any further questions there. And at that point now, I think Megan can read out any questions that we may have.
Yeah, so we'll start the question and answer period now. So feel free to throw anything in the question and answer box you'd like the project team to address. We do have one question in here already. What are the traffic volume predictions for 50 years from now? Or into the future, I guess.
I don't have those numbers off the top here, but certainly there is always a growth factor that's looked at in terms of traffic volume. As we all know, there's always an emphasis to get people out of cars and onto bicycles and on sidewalks. So that's all factored in all these considerations. But there is essentially a growth factor that's applied to traffic volumes over the years.
Thank you. Okay, we have another question here. I noticed there's a note for no and waterworks. Currently, the piers act as a natural dam with trees, garbage, etc. Would there be a consideration to clean up the piers and renaturalize the riverbed?
Typically, when you undertake these sorts of projects, there is some measure to clean up any trees that hang up on piers. If that is the case, that would be generally undertaken during a period that would have least impact to natural habitats. From a restoration perspective, we would be looking to look at alternatives with our ecology people. I might go on the limb a little bit here, saying that anything you do touch in the water may be construed as actually detrimental as opposed to improving the situation. But those are sorts of considerations that would be looked at with our ecology people as part of the CEA process.
Thank you. Okay, some questions about construction. So one concern around would there be construction that further impedes traffic flow from the northwest and west areas of the city, specifically the Warncliffe, Stanley Street, Horton Bridge, and street widening? To do these two projects at the same time would create huge congestion, wait times, and divert traffic through residential areas, which would probably result in safety concerns. So kind of a comment / question there.
I can provide initial comment, and maybe Carl or Jane, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of timing of projects around the city, these are looked at from city staff. I would suggest that those particular projects named on Warncliffe, Stanley, Horton Street would actually take place before any work is done on this project. This is an EA process. There is some preliminary design, but it is yet to be, there's another process following which would follow into detailed design. So we're years off doing anything with this structure. And from that perspective, I would suggest that work that was mentioned would actually be complete by the time this would be initiated.
I'll just add to that, John. That's a really good question. And the ESR will have a section on cumulative impacts where we will, excuse me, we'll look at, other projects in the area and their timing, but very good question. So it'll be in the ESR if there are any overlap projects that, could interact with each other.
And I'll add to that, we're anticipating this bridge to be in 2026. Before that, the project that was noted with the CN underpass by Horton Street is a project that we have scheduled to start next year. I expect that'll be a 2-year project. And we, as staff, we try to coordinate as best as we can. There is a lot of things happening in the city, and rapid transit has presented some challenges around the city, but we're trying to manage that as best we can to limit the impacts. Go ahead, Jane.
Can I add one more thing? The Queen's Bridge needs to be rehabilitated before Kensington Bridge can be done. So right now, tentatively, Queen's Bridge is 2025 and Kensington Bridge is 2026. These are all subject to budget availability, so they may slide a few years too.
Thanks, team. That's helpful. Okay, just see if any other questions come through. I may actually do a quick poll. We are just doing some research about people's preferences since we're doing so many webinars and public information centers virtually. So I'll just do a quick poll if you can quickly throw in an answer while we wait for a few more questions. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Seems like more of our attendees would have attended, are attending online, but probably wouldn't have made it in person. So that's good to know. Okay, and just one clarification, where is the Queen's Bridge? Is it the adjoining bridge?
That's correct. Queen's Bridge is actually the Queen's Avenue Bridge, but it is officially named Queen's Bridge. So that is the bridge to the north of Kensington Bridge.
Thank you. And just a comment here around use of the bridge, that it would be that they would love to see Kensington Bridge close to traffic and be used as a park, linking other parks along the river together. Obviously, this would require modification or replacement of Queens Ave, but just another comment there around use of the bridge. Okay, some more questions with regards to the two bridges. What year were these bridges twinned? Would give an indication as to the life expectancy of the new ones.
Life expectancy of a new bridge is a default 75 years from the bridge code. with today's materials and advances in technologies, that can often be advanced to 100 years. So 75-year would be a minimum service life expectation for a new bridge, and 100 is probably a more realistic number you can achieve. And just to reiterate, for the rehabilitation, we'd be looking at a 50-year additional service life. It does extend the age of this bridge, but again, with some modern materials and other technologies that can be deployed on a rehabilitation, 50 years is not a unreasonable expectation.
And Kyle Gagno, can you answer when the Queen's Bridge was constructed? I'm thinking 1970s, but I'm not certain, but that would address the when was the bridge twinned per se? When was Queen's Ave Bridge built?
Yeah, no problem. The Queen's Bridge was built in 1973, and it was named the Queen's Bridge after Queen Elizabeth II's visit to London in the same year.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, again, we'll just give a couple minutes to see if any other questions come through. And I'll just take a moment to remind everyone or let people know that the city is developing a mobility master plan right now. So a city-wide plan for the way we move around the city for the next 25 years. The Kensington Bridge project's on our Get Involved site, but as is something called the Mobility Master Plan. And if you click on it, there is a short survey that you can fill out about your mobility experience. So whether you walk, bike, use transit, get around in a car or Ubers or taxis, whatever you do, we want to hear the good, the bad, how things are when you're getting around the city so we can make improvements for the future. So some big picture planning work going on right now on that front. For those of you interested in helping shape that. Not seeing any other questions just yet, but we will stick around for a little while and see if any others come through. A question around Queensbridge. Will there be a public information center for that, or is it an EA not required for that work?
The Queensbridge EA component was addressed through the rapid transit study work that was done. So an EA is not required for the rehab of Queens Ave Bridge, or sorry, the Queensbridge. There will be a PIC as we move through detailed design, and we're getting ready for construction to show people what the work will entail and what the end result will be, but there is no formalized EA required for that structure.
Thanks, Jane. So feel free to keep on sending questions through, and you can, of course, always email Carl from the city team directly if you have any questions that come to mind afterwards. We do encourage you to share this PIC presentation with your networks who may be interested in this content or having questions or commenting on the alternatives. Again, I will post it online tomorrow morning. I'm not seeing any questions come through just yet, but I do want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. We really do appreciate you coming on and learning about the project and giving us your feedback. It's really important to hear from everyone. And I see we have Councillor Fife Miller on the call. Thank you for joining us as well. Okay. There are a few of our attendees starting to drop off. We might have one more question coming through. Just give it a few more minutes, as I think we might have another question coming. Okay. Question around city limit pillars that used to be there at the west end of the bridge. They were removed about 15 years ago. Not sure what happened to them, might be in storage, and wondering if they could be returned.
There were indeed pillars on the west side of the bridge. Initially, there were pillars on the other side as well, I believe. I'm not sure about the location of them at this point in time. However, sort of nod to those pillars would be one of the items that we would look at as part of rehabilitation. In many cases, reinstating such things could be detrimental from a safety or other type of perspective that would have to be looked at through a modern lens. But certainly providing that nod to that heritage component would be something we would look as an option in rehabilitation. Not sure if Kyle Gagne wanted to mention anything further about those.
Thanks, John. They are something that we've been looking a little bit more into and trying to find historical records, photographs, that kind of thing. So if anyone is familiar with those and has a photo tucked away, it's something that would really help us trying to reconsider those elements. Like John said, noting any safety considerations that would be necessary and what those could potentially look like. We can see one, I hope that's popping up on everyone's screen now. We've got a couple of photos, and I know that there's a few London Free Press photographs as well from back further in time, but really beautiful elements of the Kensington Bridge that have been lost. Thanks for sharing that, John.
Yeah, that was a good question too.
Awesome. Okay, there's only a few of us left, but if there's any final questions, please feel free. Questions or comments? Thank you to everyone again for joining. Okay, with that, we will conclude the webinar, and I will upload this video online so it's shareable, and we look forward to additional questions and comments. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.